So this is kind of a unique opportunity you guys have. You won't be listening to me, don't worry. You've heard enough of me. But speak directly to folks that are very familiar with what is required for the Terminal Flight Data Manager that's being rolled out, and that includes both the industry side and the FAA side of the house. So this is really an informal discussion. You're not going to have death by PowerPoint here. But I do think there are a few slides that Mr. Huffman will kick us off with. Feel free to submit the questions in this panel, and that's my job in this one, is to watch those and to, once we get to that section, start talking about those. But I wanted to thank Carol Hugel from American Airlines, Mike Huffman, and Eric Cole from the FAA for leading this discussion, and I'm really looking forward to the dialogue. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'll go ahead and kick it off. I'm Mike Huffman. We'll start off and talk about, I think Carol thought it was a good idea to talk about some of the activities required on the FAA side to get the system out there. There were some questions, so I pulled up the slides. I'm going to go to the slides that we skipped over yesterday, and really is about the waterfall. And some of those key activities that are up on the upper right-hand side. There was questions about why we're going to Phoenix first, and then we're going to go back to Phoenix and implement the departure queue management capabilities. So TFDM is being built as a layered philosophy. I don't know, there's a couple different panels that talked about that. But we had two major software builds we're producing, and the first one is primarily electronic flight strip capability, and then we're layering on top of that the surface scheduling and surface metering capabilities. So the kicker was, because of the significant amount of culture change is required to go from paper flight strips to electronic flight strips, as well as the huge culture change and all the required activities both on the FAA side and the operator side to go to departure queue management capabilities. We thought it was too much risk to do that all in one big bang for the initial deployment. So the initial deployment at Phoenix is primarily electronic flight strips. It also includes all our hardware and all our support systems that are required to field the system into the NAS. So we wanted to layer in that first set of capabilities, get those through a process we have in the FAA called an in-service decision process, and then we could roll out the initial set of those capabilities and then layer on top at the key site at Charlotte the departure queue management capabilities. Phoenix was picked, one of the key reasons Phoenix was picked for a key site is they already have a prototype electronic flight strip system that we deployed called AFS. It was deployed back in 2012, and we've continually modified that system and improved it to a point where it's usable in the NAS, and we deployed it to Cleveland, and we also had to deploy it to Charlotte in order for ATD-2 to work. So we've had a lot of lessons learned from the AFS prototype that was deployed in Phoenix, as well as in Charlotte and Cleveland, and rolled those changes into the TFDM production system that's already actually physically in Phoenix. But so part of the process that we have to go through is we have to deploy the initial system into a key site, go through all our development testing, go through all our operational testing, declare IOC. There's another process where an independent group comes in and evaluates the system as well as all the procedures and the processes that are used to maintain and operate the system. It's an independent operational assessment. And all our safety assessments and security assessments that we have to do, and all the information that we've done from all the testing rolls into a process called the in-service decision. And the in-service decision for the Bill 1 capability is scheduled for now October of next year. So I can't actually IOC any additional site till we get through that in-service decision. And it's another checkpoint that the FAA has added. It was added several years ago. So that once we get through the development and the operational testing of a system, we've gone IOC and we checked out the system, we've met all the requirements of the FAA that are over and above the requirements that are typically included in a program. You know, ensuring safety of the NAS, not breaking anything else, making sure the system's operationally suitable, that the technicians can maintain it, that the training was correct, that the controllers can operate it. We actually have a 319-item checklist we have to get through, and all these other organizations in the FAA have to sign off on that. And it's a very significant process to go through before we can deploy any other system into NAS. So that's the reason we have an in-service decision. One thing we are allowed to do, though, and I got permission when I baselined the program, to go ahead and start installing systems at other sites. I just can't go IOC. So we have staged on the waterfall several sites, at least 6 or 7 sites after that, to be actually have the systems installed, have them tested, start the training for the controllers and technicians. So on the day I get the in-service decision, we can go IOC pretty soon after that at the additional site. So we'll maintain a flow of waterfall. And so you can see about 6 sites on the waterfall after Phoenix before we get to Charlotte, and go through the same process with the second build, layering on those capabilities and all the changes we have to do for that. And then once we get the in-service decision for the build 2 capabilities, I can deploy to the rest of the sites. So it's a multi-step process we have to go through. One of the questions we had that Carol asked, or that has come up, is why we have to go back to Phoenix. So once we get the in-service decision for the build 2 capabilities, I got to go back to Phoenix. We got to layer in those capabilities, re-optimize the system, retrain all the controllers, some technician training, as well as work with the operators to be able to turn on the departure queue management, the metering capability. That's after Charlotte and after the Charlotte in-service decision. So I don't know if that clarified what some of the questions that you had. So on the FAA side, obviously we're focused a lot on what it's going to take to transition to TFDM. Like I said, it's a big culture shift for controllers to go to the from paper flight strip to electronic flight strips. Phoenix was chosen because they have a electronic flight strip prototype system there now. It'll make the transition easier at that site. And then Cleveland is another obvious site that we're going to second because it's got an electronic flight strip prototype capability. But then we're going to hit a few other sites in the middle that are smaller facilities that support. Phoenix, Mesa Gateway, then we're going to Raleigh-Durham, Indianapolis, and then we're going to hit LAX. But LAX is going to be a layered implementation too. Now, one of the reasons LAX is in there to implement early is we were requested to move LAX up on the waterfall to help with some of the issues that they're having in controlling the surface because of the construction that was going on at LAX and their typical surface management issues that occur at the site. So we were requested to move LAX up on the waterfall with the least electronic flight strip capability to improve the efficiency of the surface management just with that basic capability. And after the in-service decision for Build 2, we're going to go back to LAX and turn on surface metering. We're doing the same thing at Philadelphia. So I think hopefully that gave you an understanding of the complexities of what we're doing to try and implement the system in a NAS. There's a lot of activities on the FAA side that we have to get in place. You know, obviously we've got to develop training for both controllers and technicians. That's been in process. Our first class for air traffic training has been validated. We have the systems installed at the academy that the technicians are going to. The training is in development for the technician training. All those activities have to be in place when I get to the in-service decision. Obviously before that, because I got to do that for Phoenix IOC, get everybody trained. But we also have to have other support capabilities in place. I have to have a second level engineering support capability, operational, which is at the technical center, and the folks that are going to be providing second level engineering support have to be trained and have the tools and capabilities to support the systems in the NAS. I also have to have a depot set up, which we've got a depot system installed, and we're buying all the spares that we need to support the system for the life cycle. So all those things that support the system for 20 years after we deploy it have to be in place by October 2020, or I'm not going to any other site. So there's a lot of activities that occur on our side to be able to prep for the initial implementation of TFDM. And when we implement the Build 2, there's no additional hardware has to be installed. It's just layer on software capabilities, turn in on new functions, and obviously working with the operators to be able to implement the surface metering. Eric's going to talk about the CSIT activities that are required and the outreach we're going to do at each individual airport to coordinate the agreements we're going to have at the local level, both with the tower, airport authority, and the operators on how we're going to implement surface metering at each individual airport. We've learned a lot of lessons from what they've done at ATD-2 at Charlotte. We'll be doing, he'll talk about the Charlotte activities, the CSIT activities there to coordinate prior to TFDM implementation at Charlotte. So I think that gives you a general idea and of the activities that are required on our side. There's still a lot of activities, obviously, on the operator side and GA to be able to hook up to SWIM, collect the TTP data. If we don't have TTP data, we're not running surface metering at any site. So you got to be able to ingest that data, but more importantly, just hooking up to SWIM and being able to process the data. There's a lot of procedures and changes that have to occur, obviously, on your side of how we're going to operate the metering information and get that all the way back down to the ramp towers and the pilots and the gate agents when we issue TMAT times to be able to run surface metering. So I don't know, is there any questions specifically about this part yet? Yeah. Right.
So there's going to be a test on everything that's necessary for in-service decision. Anybody here think they'll pass? That was a lot of information, Mike. Thank you for that. So a couple of questions have popped up, and feel free to enter them, by the way. Someone asked, can the in-service decision occur earlier than scheduled?
No, it typically can't. So I said there's activities that occur. Once we go IOC at the site, there's an independent operational system has to occur. In order to develop the reports from that, all the activities to get through the process to the in-service decision process, we actually have to go and get approvals from several different organizations in the FAA that we satisfied all the items on the checklist. And there's a tremendous amount of bureaucracy within the FAA to get that process completed. And then there's prep activities that have to occur. There's a lot of briefings that have to go on, pre-briefs that have to occur before we get to the point where Terry Bristol, who's actually the in-service decision authority, makes the decision in October. So actually between May and October is tight. Typically it takes longer than that, but as we are on TFDM, we're very aggressive, and we're going to push the envelope on trying to get that done in that time frame. But the amount of activity required to get an in-service decision, because it's basically a blessing for us to deploy to the NAS and never have to go back for tasks except for build 2 capabilities. But there's a lot of action. If there's open issues on the in-service decision checklist that are not critical to the operation in the NAS, we have to develop poems, plan of actions and milestones to get those corrected. Those all have to be worked out and approved by the different parts of the agency that have those items on the checklist that they agree with our plan to fix any issues that are open. There's a lot of coordination that has to go on just to get through this process. It's almost as difficult as trying to get a final investment decision, and that is extremely difficult in the agency. So I don't know if that
Thank you, Mike. Yes, it does. Does anyone remember how many items are on that checklist? Let's test.
Yeah.
Was it?
319.
319. I was hoping it was 314, like pi or something.
Yeah.
We could take a few off. All right. There was another question that may be for everyone on the panel here, but it's still relevant probably before we go to the CSIT, and that is, what specific training resources will the FAA provide to the airline ramp towers prior to implementing TFDM at each airport?
So I think that might be more of a CSIT question, and I think I'll just go into CSIT, and then that kind of explains the answer to that question. My name's Eric Cole. I'm the team lead for the Collaborative Site Implementation Team, or CSIT. It's a mouthful. What does that mean? We're the liaison to the non-FAA stakeholders. We brief everybody that is not air traffic control. So Mike's side, they have other people that represent the TFDM program and brief air traffic controllers. We mostly brief airlines, airports, business aviation, general aviation, and anybody else who wants to speak with us. We have briefed air traffic control in the past, though, just to level set. If we're going to go out and talk to LAX, we're going to talk to the air traffic control tower there, too, to make sure that they're on the same page as the users. They are not caught by surprise. It's the only fair way to treat management and NACA at the facility. The other activities we have is, as we go out, and you can see the CSIT schedule up there, and I'll explain that more in a minute, we support the creation of surface working groups and how you're going to prepare and get ready at the local level for TFDM coming. We also gather data for the program office. That's mostly not very interesting for everybody else in the room, but through that process, we do a lot of EOBT research, and we do a lot of TTP work. And we found that as we are engaging with the operations centers of the airlines, that they're very interested in our EOBT research and TTP efforts, and that a lot of times we're able to help them further. So as a liaison outside of the FAA, one of the things that happens is we have the connections to the engineers in the TFDM program office, or with TFM if you're having data submission issues, and we can provide support. Obviously, SWIFT is a great organization to participate in and to use their resources, but if you're having problems outside of that and you want some individual attention, we've been helping airlines on that front.
Can I jump in real quick? So one of the activities that goes on with the CSITs is a lot of data that's collected on the airport itself. Gates, gate usage, ramp areas, holding areas, a lot of information that's gathered with his activities that the CSIT perform that feed back into the program office, because we have to take all that information on our initial adaptation and optimization of the system. Prior to going IOC at the site, we have to implement initial set of capabilities for the system. And then through our optimization process, the system will learn observing real-time operations without being operational in the cab, and to be able to optimize our initial set of what we plan to do for the surface metering. So we take the activities and the information that come from the CSIT, a lot of the other information we already have, and optimize the system performance long before we ever get to a point where we're going to try and turn it on.
That's really good points. And it's also ties into some of the things that Carol said yesterday, which to gather that information requires a lot of collaboration. We've been working with ACINA, with Chris Oswald and Paul Eubanks, and who's provided us contacts for the 27 airports that will be receiving surface metering. And those airports have been helping us get information on gate usage. And that's very helpful for the program. And in return, we're briefing the airport authorities so that they have an understanding of TFDM. The next thing I want to do real quick is thank NASA and Al Capps, Sean England, Jeremy Coop, and Isaac Robeson, who works with them with Mosaic. In our CSIT efforts, we started off originally with the concept that we were just going to go to the 27 airports. And our very first Surface CDM team meeting, Rob Goldman suggested that we go to the operation centers, and we didn't realize that there was different levels of knowledge at these operation centers. There were some people that are clearly experts, other people that had working knowledge, and other people that had no knowledge whatsoever. So that was very, very important. The concept of operations for TFDM is outstanding. The work that's been done building the program is great, and the modeling that Christina David does through Nobilis is good. But when you add the lessons learned from ATD-2 and say, this really works, and being able to bring the engineers with us when we go has been tremendous. So I really thank Al and everybody on his team. Some of the valuable lessons learned, and I'll just bullet point them very quickly from ATD-2 that's been helpful for us, is that surface metering works. And you get benefits. If you hold an aircraft at a gate for 5 minutes, you get that 5-minute benefit. But you also get a benefit of an improved taxi situation on the surface, on the ramp, where you don't taxi as long out. So there's another few minutes that are gained on the taxi to the runway that I would not normally have anticipated. We've also been told to, or asked questions about gate contentions. I think it's important to focus on the idea that both ATD-2 and TFDM are looking for a sweet spot when you're doing queue lengths or queue number, and you're trying to avoid as much gate contention as possible. But the other factor that I have as many years as an air traffic controller that I know about is that inbound aircraft frequently can't get to open gates. And what you see in the modeling for a DCA or a Phoenix is that there's benefit for inbound aircraft that were getting caught in large departure queues and now can get to the gate. And I think that that's important to keep in mind. I can't overstate how important the pre-scheduling of departure releases is and how important that is for decision-making for air traffic controllers and for airlines. The paradigm that we operate under mostly now is that an aircraft pushes back, we call for release, and that's the first time the pilot and the airline find out about their delay. So if you're in the Northeast Corridor and you're trying to schedule to LaGuardia, you frequently find out that you have a 60-minute delay to LaGuardia after you've pushed back, and that's difficult to make decisions. Do you pull back into the gate? Do you look for a place to park? You can't really find fuel savings at that time. So while there's been great efficiencies using IDAC and ATD-2 to pre-schedule and get better times, there's also the factor if you're not getting a good time that you have the decision capability prior to pushing back. I was also really pleased on this because a lot of times when we talk, I'm pleased with this forum, when we talk about ATD-2 or TFDM, there's so much focus on the surface metering that we forget that it's Terminal Flight Data Manager, and a lot of the data exchange and the TTP aspects of it are so important. If you get anything out of this conference, I think it should be that you want to educate yourself on TTP, how it works and what data is available to you, and also to realize that this is a NASA tech transfer and that the tools that they used on the surface in Charlotte, maybe you don't want to go line by line from code, but you do want to go find out what worked for them and what the users liked and need, because leading to my next step, some of the lessons learned that we had from CSIT was going to the operation centers is there's a life cycle to this new process. And I think some other people have mentioned it, but the first thing you need to do is onboard with SWIM. Then you need to try to submit data, including EOBTs. Normally you don't have a unique data field for EOBT, it's a substitute value. Then they try to get a unique value, and then it's trying to go a little bit further so that so that you can develop tools with it. And the next step beyond that, that I think we're just getting ready to get onto, is figuring out what your own policy, procedures, and tools are going to be by the time TFDM gets out there. That can't happen the day we get there. That's important for us on the CSIT schedule. You can see that in 2020, we're going to 4 sites: Charlotte, Phoenix, LAX, and San Francisco. We think the sweet spot for visiting and setting up surface working groups is about a year to 18 months in advance. There'll probably be 12 months to 14 months. That gives us time to develop a report to give to the program, but it also allows the local constituents to start working on it. As Carol said, every airport is unique, and every airport is going to have the ability to influence how TFDM is operated at their facilities. Queue length is not set by the program office back in DC. Those things will be decided locally and through collaboration, and a lot of other factors are going to go into it. It's really important when I show up in, well, Charlotte's probably going to be a little bit easier because they're very familiar, but in Phoenix, LAX, and San Francisco, if your people know what your policies are. They don't have to be our policies, but they need to know if you've bought into it, if you think there's benefits, that if you're going to have roles and responsibilities for them, that they're going to interact with the system. I think that they need to know that before we get there. And so that might be some internal conversations for the airlines and airports to start having now. I have a few more things, but I think I'll save them, and I'll let Carol get into the conversation, and then I'll throw them out.
But I don't think we answered the original question, though, right?
About training.
So other than the activities that Eric talked about, one of the things they're coming with is the local agreements, other in-briefs. There's no training provided by the FAA to the ramp towers.
Other than it's important for the TFDM level setting from the CSIT. It's going to be a 2-day instruction class and then a collaboration with the air traffic control tower. We do have an LOA template that we've run through Surface CDM team. It's just a guideline of kind of the questions you need to answer. What configurations do you have? What kind of coordination do you have? Do you want to do 20 calls a day about surface metering, or do you want to set up and say, these are the guidelines when we'll surface meter, and if you're going to do something that's outside of that realm, then we'll coordinate. It's that kind of thing. We also, with the help of MITRE, created a user guide. The user guide is simple and straightforward. It's not going to say, I use my surface tool to click this or click that, but it will say your roles and responsibilities, what data you need to consume and understand, and what times you need to comply with, and what benefits they provide.
Covered.
Yeah, so my immediate reaction to that question was the FAA does not do that. I'm totally on board with what you just said, Mike. So from my perspective, the answer to that question is that it's on the onus of each of the operators to determine what your training should be. So I would just suggest that the CSIT activities are much more high level. They're not going to get into what your specific position used ramp control in the question, what that function is supposed to do in terms of terminal flight data manager. And I would suggest there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done. We are the launch carrier and have been doing this for several years, and we are still working through roles and responsibilities. So the FAA can broadly state, on this side of the line, here's what the operator is expected to do. There's an awful lot of coordination that needs to be worked through. I mentioned yesterday, how are our pilots going to know that there's a metering program that's been suggested? Most folks know at the end of the day, the FAA is going to have 51% of the vote in terms of, okay, a metering program has been suggested. There can be some collaboration, but at the end of the day, it's going to get turned on. And how do our gate agents know? We're still working through the benefits of knowing there's going to be metering hold and, for example, customer care, customer ops. We've talked a lot over the years about, we're going to be able to, put more bags on. We're going to be able to hold for these connecting passengers if we know they've got an extra few minutes on the gate. We actually have not experimented and seen those benefits yet because we're still working through a piece of the concept which is very important, which is freezing those times, right? At some point, you got to freeze the TMATs. So the concept is about 30 minutes out, and a reasonable person would say, well, that sounds really good. But through all the testing, you got to look at things like the accuracy of the data. So I would suggest our team, our OR team, which has been led by Tim Nisnik and company, done a tremendous job trying to determine what goes into American Airlines EOBT. So you got to kind of get through all that first, and then you start to tackle, okay, so the concept really says 30 minutes out, no fooling. Well, we kind of like the accuracy at 30 minutes, and then as we start to march forward and march backward, I should say, we're still noodling over, Carol's terms, noodling over what we're able to do at 30 minutes out. So to date, we actually haven't exercised that piece of the concept, and that is freezing those times. So you can see how not doing that, well, customer care and customer ops aren't able to do much at 5 minutes out. They would have needed to have made decisions at that 30-minute point. So I just share that because training is going to be, from our perspective, really, really significant. And then for us, when we go from one station to the next, we might have a different construct for our control centers. So for example, in Charlotte, we have a very different construct for managing pushbacks, managing the flows. We actually have a manager who oversees ramp controllers. Well, that's not the case in some of our other stations. So even for us, I'm going to go back to once you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. We are going to have to look at the training for similar positions in different stations. So I think there needs to be a lot of collaboration with the FAA. Certainly our NATCA partners in Charlotte have been tremendous, but it's also probably a little bit more informal, and as we get closer to implementation of TFDM, we're going to have to put a little bit more structure around, okay, when are we using this metering? And a message that I've been bringing to our entire team is that Charlotte is a lot of flexibility, and we can sort of choose. And sometimes we say, life's too complicated today, we're not going to do that. And my message is we're not going to be able to do that with TFDM. Like, think edict. So training is going to be really significant. And it's the first thing that gets cut in everybody's budget when things get a little bit tight. But I would encourage everybody to think about a really formal, comprehensive training plan, and a lot of input from our friends on the FAA side in terms of that vote, right? They don't know that we're going to take some flights out, right? So if we're going to cancel, then maybe there wouldn't be a suggestion for a metering program. So a lot to work through with the training.
Thank you. That was a great answer. So one quick question probably for Mike, and then we'll hop back to one that's probably for the whole panel. And their question was related to technical, since TFDM is efficiency critical, will SWIM have to be efficiency critical? Currently, it's only essential.
Yeah, and according to Josh Guston yesterday, that they've been redesignated as efficiency critical, and they're going through a tech refresh. And as they go through that tech refresh process, they're going to bring the system up to efficiency critical.
Okay, thank you. And there was a question here about specifically focused on what the community needs to do before CSIT. So what equipment and protocols do airports need to have in place prior to the CSIT?
So one of our experiences, we went out to LA, and there was an airline that is very positive on TFDM and ATD-2, but we didn't think ahead to have them brief their people. So we spent the majority of our time sitting with somebody who went, we will never do that. We're not participating in that. My people do not agree with this. And it was our fault for not really saying, hey, airline ABC, you need to reach out to the people and tell them what your philosophy is. It doesn't have to, like I was saying earlier, it doesn't have to be our philosophy, but you need to express that this is a culture change that's coming. This is something that you want to embrace for the benefits that you can receive.
So there's no specific equipment they'll need to have in place
not
prior
the
to a
equipment,
CSIP,
no.
is it? It's really it's more of an information exchange and a data gathering process. Also, you're going to bring products to them.
Sure. Yeah.
To be able to utilize and help. One of the key things we saw at Charlotte that was in place long before we started ATD-2 was the Surface Working Group. It's a collaborative process that's been going on for a long time at Charlotte to be able to manage the surface more efficiently, including the air traffic control facility and the operators in the airport authority. That's something that Eric is going to help try and facilitate at each one of the individual airports that don't have that capability today. So I think that's a key tech transfer but it's not technology. It's a working agreement on how we're going to operate the system and how we're going to move forward collaboratively. Carol did talk about when it comes to surface metering, the FAA has 51% vote. They are in charge of the movement area. We control it. So if we decide to run metering, we're going to run metering. That's the tower's call. But it's always going to be in collaboration with the operators. If there's a situation on the airport where it's just not going to work for whatever reason, or the way we've set up the system initially and it's not working perfectly, we're not going to force metering if it's not working in the operation. And it's going to be a collaborative decision to decide whether or not to run metering. Now, Eric talked about if, like at Charlotte, we got 4 or 5 pushes a day, we're running metering every day, and that's a common situation, we can get agreement that doesn't require coordination. But if there's outside the cycle times when we think that the demand's going to exceed the capacity for whatever reason, we lose a runway, then we may implement surface metering. There may be some phone calls that occur. But all this information will be transmitted. If we have a surface metering SMP coming up, it'll be transmitted through the TTP to let you know at 2 o'clock we plan to start running metering. But those outside the norm metering times, will be voice coordination, I would assume, between the tower and the operators.
Yeah, whatever they decide on locally with LOA.
Yeah,
But
and that's all based on the agreements that we come up with as they start the CSIP process.
I think Mike makes a real valid point, though, is, on the data side, the Terminal Flight Data Manager through TTP, whatever the controllers in the tower see, whatever gets recommended to them for surface metering, you'll see the same things. You'll be able to get the same data and information. So if they defer a program or decline a program or accept it, you see all the same thing through the same data feed. So it's a way that we're actually collaborating in a new way and a new level.
But just a point of clarification, Eric, I don't think it's fair to say everybody's going to see the same thing. And I get back to what you see in Charlotte is not what you're going to get. So what the agency is making available is data and lots of it. So folks need to be able to consume it and then decide how are you going to enable your team to see it and know what it is they're supposed to do with it. So that's just a really important distinction that so the solution providers are here, some not here. Those are the folks who you need to go talk to, or your own internal folks, about, okay, we're going to have this enormous amount of data. What are we going to pick off, and what do the people need in certain positions? I mean, the last thing you want to do is give a certain position all this data when they don't really need it. They need 2 of the 20. So it really is about how are you going to disseminate it to the people who need to have it.
I completely agree. One of the things that was coming up as a question in the other sessions was, the FAA is not providing a tool. We're not going to have a common view. I understand that, but the idea of how much data comes out of TTP, do you want the FAA to parse and select what you don't get to see, or do you want to make business decisions on your own of what's important to you? And I really think it's better off that if each airline and each airport gets to decide this is what we really want to see out of the data and not everything, and not have us make the decisions for it.
So I think a big question in terms of, I completely agree with what Eric just said. I mean, certainly we want access, right? We want to take that data, cull through it, and make our own decisions about where we disseminate it internally. But I do think there's a lot of dialogue to be had about things like roles and responsibilities typically. So if there's a TMI today, a lot of work obviously back and forth with the command center. In most cases, it's our ATC coordinators who are doing that. I'll just say negotiation, dialogue on the calls. So what does an SMP look like, right? So that's now at the tower, it's local. We certainly have to explore, okay, does our team locally, let's use Charlotte as an example, make decisions about substitutions, or really that actually still has to happen with our ATC coordinators? So I think there's still a lot of dialogue around what is the command center going to look at, because typically we know pretty much what they're looking at. So there is dialogue to be had around, on I would just say not just the local FAA folks, but where is the command center role. But again, I truly take on board that it's our responsibility to ingest the data and disseminate it. But I don't know that we've dotted the I and crossed the T on the logistics with the command center.
Well, the command center is part of the TFDM program. We're paying for changes to TFMS to provide a surface viewer for each one of the individual airports that run the surface metering, as well as all our scheduling information and upcoming TMI surface metering program times. That data is going to be published through TFMS to the existing displays that they have at the command center, as well as at the TMCs at the TRACONs and the centers. So they can know what's going on at the surface. They know at 2 o'clock we're going to start running a surface metering program. So the situational awareness, not only from the tower, but at the other domains, will be implemented through this modification to TFMS. And we're starting in Phoenix in 2020.
So Eric, maybe you can include that in your
Yeah.
the
So one of
guide that you were talking about.
Yeah, so one of the
That would
things
be-
that I didn't really understand when I first became involved with TFDM, because I thought there was one tool and there was no tool for anybody else, is what Mike was talking about, the SSA. So any place in the FAA that you have a TFMS workstation, you'll be able to get an SSA. So the TRACONs, the in-route centers, and the command center will be able to share the view that the tower has. They're just not going to have the decision-making capability that's going to happen at the local level.
Yeah, it's all still going to be made at the tower.
We had a question about the OIS page the other day, and I think that's very important. My group is working with the command center, and we have approval already to have surface metering put onto the OIS page. And my group actually pointed out it's a little more complicated than you would think. So originally we thought, okay, you just have 27 airports in surface metering, not in surface metering, proposed to start at. But because it breaks down to configurations, you could be surface metering to runway 36, but not to the other runways. I think it needs to be a little more complex and robust than that. But that's going to be a basic informational tool that you'll have from the OIS. But again, through TTP, you'll have the same. If you're hooked up to TTP and you want to have that information, you can get it real time coming through TTP.
Great news.
Great. That was a great answer. And I think actually you guys gave a little bit more response as to what's necessary to start working on now. That's how I interpreted that question. And, before CSIT, right? Because there's about a year, before the system actually gets deployed, 12 to 15 months, right, that the CSIT will visit the facility. So, Carol, I was wondering on the operator side, are there things that folks in the audience need to start thinking of right now, even if TFDM isn't coming to their site in the next 12 to 15 months?
Isn't?
If it isn't, yeah, if it's beyond.
still need
So like right now, the full up TFDM with surface metering is scheduled for Charlotte, right? And next summer, or was it that? Yeah, I should know this,
Yeah,
right?
821.
So sites beyond that, I mean, what should they start doing to prepare?
So I would say first and foremost, education. I said this yesterday, not to sound like a broken record, but there are a lot of folks who really do not understand the concept of surface CDM and the departure metering and the impact on the operation. I think it's really, really important to start the dialogue and help people understand what in fact it is. And I would say in parallel, I'm usually a multitasker in my world. In parallel, there needs to be a lot of discussion about how it is that the infrastructure is going to work at a particular operator. It's a big, big deal to exchange the data. And I would also suggest that this earliest off block time and what comprises an earliest off block time for operator A is going to be different than operator B. And getting it right and what right is really something that's determined by the individual operators is a long haul. And a lot of people need to look at it and contribute to it and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I think the understanding and educating is really, really important. Certainly the data exchange is really important, but that EOBT and the potential to have a really tremendous impact cannot be overstated, and that could be tremendously positive or not so positive. We're still learning every day. I can tell you we're doing bi-weekly calls supported by NASA and the FAA, and it really is very much about process. Who is going to do what, when? And that earliest off-block time and the impact to the entire system is really, really significant. So sooner rather than later, education, talking about the data exchange, absolutely have to happen.
Thank you. Excellent. Mike, I think this question is for you. Activity has changed. The question is, activity has changed since the deployment waterfall was set. Is there consideration to move up the fastest growing airports? I think you already mentioned one example where someone had reached out to you due to some of the challenges that they
Yeah, I
had,
got
right?
told by Terry Bristol to move LAX, so
That's how it changes,
I
right?
sleep. Typically because unless there's a really hard reason, like I get told, to move a site, there's a lot of activities that are going on in order to install the system in a site. It's not just if I move a site on the waterfall, there's a financial impact to the program. Not only with our contract with Leidos, because we're buying equipment for that each individual site, there's site prep activities that have to occur to be able to start and be able to modify the site to be able to install the system. So all these plans have been laid out, and they've actually been laid out through 2029, which is the full deployment time frame. We've already laid out every activity at every site. We've got it all scheduled. It's all in our corporate work plan. It's already in the contract with Leidos. We're already buying the equipment for the first 12 sites. And so if I swap a site out, there's a financial impact, and it has to be a significant justifiable reason why it occurs. There's a, I don't know if I mentioned it the other day, but there's a lay-in to the waterfall. There's a resource load on not only TFDM, but in addition to TFDM being deployed in the NAS, there's a multitude of other systems that are being deployed at the same time. And we have to balance those activities with the other programs that are implementing, because they're using the same resources to do site prep as we are. So if I ripple a site, it has an effect on other programs in the agency. There's a big impact on air traffic controller training, and the time it takes to get the controllers trained. If it overlaps with any other system that's going in, if they were there first, we're not doing our training. So there's a lot of activities that have to be coordinated, not only just on TFDM and our contract and engineering services, it's other programs in the agency that are implementing at the same time. So, you know, I can't go in the Northeast right now and make a bunch of changes. Ours are delayed a little bit because of the Northeast corridor activities for the NEC. So it's not a very simple just move a site up because it's growing. It's the sites were laid in, the waterfall was coordinated to manage the resources around the country. We took into account not trying to overload any particular part of the country at the same time because of the resources available to do the work, to do the site prep. We have to coordinate the training at each individual facility. So it's not a simple case of just moving a site around. There is an attempt to maximize the benefits of the program to implement all the top 27 sites, all the sites we're going to do metering early as possible in the waterfall. So those are all going to be done by the 24 time frame. We still are deploying a significant number of sites after that, and again, it goes all the way out to almost 2029. So we've tried to maximize the benefit of getting the sites, but we have to not overload any one area and coordinate with other facilities to implement. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you. I think this one's mainly to Carol. I think the question is to unwrap a little bit more. Carol, when you're mentioning that what you see and what's not to get yesterday, there were some questions yesterday, and we didn't bring them up yesterday, but I don't want people to feel like I'm ignoring the question. And so the question today was, what ATD features will not be included in TFDM? Carol mentioned yesterday that some ATD tools will be going away. So not so much, I think, a comparison of features or anything like that, but from your perspective, when you've been saying that, what do you mean by that?
Okay. So when you visit Charlotte, generally what we try and do is help you understand it from the operator perspective as well as air traffic. So that's typically a visit to our control center as well as over to the tower. So when you come to our control center, you'll see this ramp traffic console, RTC. And RTC is what's used very much by our ramp traffic manager who oversees the ramp control functions in the control center. That RTC does not come with TFDM. So folks look at it because it's part of our overview because we use it. And obviously there's a lot of exchange with what folks would see over in the tower, but it goes away. So we have selected a solution provider to take those capabilities and make them part of our selection. So I just caution folks when they arrive and then they leave, they think that, I call them NASA's toys, which we love, that those toys stay, and somehow when Mike Huffman pulls up with the TFDM implementation, that those are there. So it's not there. And I'm also piggybacking on the comment Eric made earlier about what you see on the other side. My expectation is that when you go in these control centers and or ramp towers, folks will see different things once TFDM is implemented, because it's going to be based on your operations, your model, obviously the configuration at the airport. So I just really want to caution that, because it's not an easy decision, and similar, it's probably not as tough as the final investment decisions at the agency, but it's really tough to sell people on IT. It's tough to sell people on data exchange, and by people I mean the bean counters who we all just love, but they're not operational people. So I can tell you it's important to share that this is effectively mandatory, that there is a new TMI coming, and every airline needs to get set for that. And we haven't had one in a long, long time. And as I said yesterday, it cannot be overstated. It's not just a new TMI. It is reaching back into the gate area, which is completely different than anything we've seen before. So you want to make sure you know what it is you want to provide to your different folks, and what solution you're going to use to do that. You may have one in-house. We didn't, so we made a choice, and that's what we're going to run with across all of our stations. So I hope that clarifies it.
Great. Yes, I thought that was really good. I like, Greg, what you did earlier about inviting the old-fashioned hands up. So I'd like to offer the opportunity for one question, and then give the panel just a heads up. We're probably going to be closing up here pretty quickly. So if you have one final thought you want to leave people with, go ahead and start thinking about that if you don't mind. But do we have any questions from the audience? Seeing none. Maybe someone will come up with one. But Eric, why don't we start with you, and Carol, we can end with you. How's that sound? Okay.
You know, from the collaborative site implementation team's point of view, I just want you to take out of this that we are a resource available to you. A lot of times there's a 400-page manual that goes with something. You can't figure out quite exactly why things aren't working the way you thought. We can't necessarily provide the direct answer to you, but we can get you the people that can. We want the program to succeed. We want you to succeed. So we are that liaison. Please reach out to us. csit@faa.gov is our email address, so it can continue on. And we really would like that. And again, to just reiterate, prepare your people for their roles and responsibilities with this system. It's time to start thinking.
Can we go next? So, you know, being on the TFDM program, I came in late 2013 to get through the investment analysis process and then carry it through to start the implementation. It was a lessons learned for me because I had never worked on the efficiency side of the house. Every system I worked on the FAA was always on the safety side. So it was a big change for me coming in. I've learned a lot of lessons, but I did take away, you know, the importance of collaboration, and that's something we've tried to continue on the program, along with everybody. You know, we continue to talk to the folks that have worked on the system for a long time. But it's important to keep the collaboration going, not only through the CSITs, but every avenue we can. We appreciate all the work that NASA's done. It's helped us out tremendously. But I do want to stress the importance of what, and touch on what Lauren talked about today. You guys asked for TFDM. You asked for surface metering. We worked hard. I'm very gray and gained a lot of weight trying to get this program through the investment analysis process to sell it to the FAA, and now we're implementing the system. We expect you guys to live up to your side of the bargain. And I know that sounds kind of crass, but we're investing $800 million of your taxpayer money to implement the system, and we need you guys to step up. Charlotte's coming quickly, and by God, we're going to be on schedule. TFDM's going to be there. So hopefully you guys are going to live up to your end and be able to support your end of the interfaces, not only for TTP, but the TFCS, which we talked about, and then I guess the next session on substitutions. So I appreciate everybody's work. We're working really hard on our side to deliver, and we appreciate if you guys would deliver on your side. Thanks. Thanks, Carol.
Carol, would you like to?
I think what Mike said is spot on. We did ask for this. We spent a lot of years really in hot pursuit of improving efficiencies on the airport surface. And I mean, I would tell you it's taken a really long time. It may feel like, oh my goodness, how did this suddenly get here? But just to go back in time, it was September 9th of 2009 that the final report from Task Force 5, which many of you participated in, was sent over. And then I can tell you exactly 12 months and 1 day later, the Surface CDM concept of operations was put on Nancy Kalinowski's desk. And at that time was when we started to talk about, this is really great, but in the FAA, we only do programs, so we don't speak these efficiency things. So Nancy and her team found a way to take that concept and make it a reality, and many of you in this room participated in years of human in the loop, and all that went over to Mike's team. I often have said that I don't know who's more excited about TFDM 1 and 2 slot, if it's Huffman or Hugel, because I just think this is such an incredible opportunity for us to improve our service to the traveling public, and also really help our own individual operations. Over the years, I think about TBFM. TBFM first came out, and we were just scrambling. Where's the data? Where's the data? The FAA's not giving us that data. Many CDM meetings where folks would stand up and we would ask for data. So now we got the pipe, probably more than anybody would ever expected. But it's really a reflection of the world we live in now, right? People expect data instantly on their devices. So a lot of thank you to Mike Huffman and his team. And I would say over the years, sometimes we've sparred a bit, but Mike finally came to understand the side that he needed to understand, which really is about efficiencies. But going back into the gate is a really huge deal. And I just want to share just a really quick recent experience that we had. And my point in sharing this is to really elucidate for you that we've been at this for years and we're still learning, courtesy of the brilliance of NASA and the contractors. So one of the things that happened to us of late, and we didn't necessarily note, but our fine business partners did. I mean, we had, I think in one bank, it was multiples, maybe 3 pilots, on the request for pushback, ask for a different runway. So if he had 3, 4, or 5 of them do that, and the TMAS are already assigned, you can imagine how, whoops. So as Eric said earlier, showing the S&Ps in effect at a particular airport, it's going to be actually by runway as well. So I share that because that was a big something that everybody kind of went, whoa, okay, well, the ramp controller did exactly what the ramp controller was supposed to do, responded to the pilot's request. But that had an impact that we had not anticipated. So I guess my overarching comment is need to get started sooner rather than later, no matter where you are on that waterfall.
Excellent closing thoughts. And it sounds to me like the panels made themselves available to you, and I would encourage you to take them up on that. Great resources right here. So thank you for your questions. Thank you, panel, for your willingness to, give these perspectives and encourage the audience to get started sooner rather than later. And I hope they take you up on your offer for help. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate it.